Time. Review question time. Here we go. Let's review some of the concepts from the last few days. And there's not a lot of mathematical stuff to review from the last lesson. And to a large extent this lesson is not really mathematical. It's about financial wisdom. Go ahead. Okay, so I want to convert dollars to euros. So I have 180 euros, and it's how many dollars per euro, so that the euros go die, you cancel each other out. So it's $1.14 per euro, and that works out to be $205.20. 180 times 1.14. How many euros are $320 worth? Well, for that one, start off with $320, but there's 0.88 euros per dollar, and then the dollars will cancel out, and 320 times 0.88 is $281.60, 0.60 euros, 281.60 euros. Forget the word dollars. Sorry about that. Next up, little percentage problem review here. Okay, you purchase a shirt with a labeled pre-tax price of $83. The local sales tax 7%. What's your final cost? The final cost is the labeled price plus 7% of the labeled price. For those comfortable with factoring, you factor out the labeled price. Or you could say it's 100% for the labeled price of the whole thing plus 7%. So that's 107% of the labeled price, which is 1.07 times 83, which is $88.81. Next up, little rule of 72 work. Okay. So 72 divided by 12 is 6. So in 6 years, the money is going to double. So how does that affect what's going on here? Well, you started out with $5,000. In 6 years, you've got $10,000. In 12 years, you've got $20,000. In 18 years, you've got $40,000. And then in 24 years, you have $80,000. Okay? So that's how much money you'll have in 24 years, $80,000. Harkening back to the last question, that's why I said when I pulled out that money to pay off credit card debt from my long-term savings, it hurt. You know, long-term, I'd love to have another 80 grand sitting in that account right now. It might have even been, probably was a little more, probably more like 100 grand. I would love to have that money right now. But I made a mistake, and I definitely paid a price for making that mistake. Heard a great quote the other day. It said, if we judge ourselves, we don't have to be judged. There's a lot of brilliance to that quote. Had I judged myself and my habits with the money back in the day and never let myself get behind on those, or I didn't get behind, I paid them off. I made the monthly payments. But if I never let a balance accumulate on my credit cards, then I would have that 100 grand. So in effect, that 100 grand is the judgment against me. So if I would have judged myself when it was starting and gotten it under control, I would have worked out much better in the long run. So it's kind of like same thing goes with your classes. If you're out in college, if you're using your time unwisely, let's word it that way, and you're not preparing for your tests, and then you turn around and you get rocked on your tests, had you, when you were not spending your time wisely, judged yourself and said, hey, you know, this isn't very smart. I got to stop this. I need to get focused on my classwork. Then you wouldn't have had such poor performances on your tests. So a lot of wisdom in that saying. If we would judge ourselves, then we would not be judged. Okay, practice problem next. Go ahead. So here's our shape, 9 by 21 by 3. That's the volume. Multiplying out the sides, I come out with 576 feet cubed, but it wants the answer in yards. Feet to yards is small to big, so we have to divide. The factor is 3, but it's 3 cubed because it's feet, so it's 3, 3, 3, which is 3 cubed. So I divide by 3 cubed, which is 27, and I come up with 21 cubic yards. Or I could do it this way. And then when I divide by them all, the feet go die, and I'm left with 21 yards cubed. The other thing to keep in mind is this. before I started the problem, I could have converted 9 feet to 3 yards, 21 feet to 7 yards, and 3 feet to 1 yard, and then multiplied all of those. I would have come up with 21. The only thing about doing it that way is if you have a fraction, like let's say you chose 23 feet, that doesn't convert evenly because 3 doesn't go to 23. Then it can get a little ugly, but that technique is still a good technique. Okay, some simple interest. Go ahead. So I equals PRT. For Elaine, she borrows $2,000 at 5% for 7 years. Must be one heck of a laptop that she's getting to borrow for 7 years for it. They love you borrowing for 7 years because they make so much more money off of you. The interest will be $700. And Elaine saying, "Oh, give me that $700. I like it." Okay, next. TJ invests $4,000 in a bond at a yearly rate of 2%. He earned $200 in interest. What was the money invested? Go ahead. Well, same formula, it doesn't change. But this time we're going to substitute 200 for the interest. It's 4,000 times 0.02 times T. 4,000 times 0.02 is 80. Dividing both sides by 80, and I get that the time is 2.5 years. Okay, a little compound interest work next. So we've done our simple interest. Now we do our compound interest. We've done our rule of 72. We have covered interest thoroughly. Go ahead. Okay. Next. Formula is what it is. A equals the amount in the account equals the principal times 1 plus the interest rate divided by n, which is how many times a year you do it. This is monthly, so it's going to be 12 to the nt power. So 55,000 to 1 plus 0.0275 divided by 12, and then 12 times 5 for 5 years. Again, I forgot to change the 10,000. It should be 55,000, but I'm sure the numbers are crunched properly, and I come up with $63,097.17. Okay. Go ahead. So a little rule of 72 action here. Okay. If I go 72 divided by 6, I get 12 years. 72 divided by 12, I get 6 years. And 72 divided by 18 is 4 years. 2 last review questions. And this review looks a lot like the last review because we really didn't do any more new math. So we might as well work on similar questions to what we did then. In fact, I even had 2 of them that were the same. Okay, the savings plan formula with regular payments. APR is annual percentage rate. N is the number of times it is pay periods per year, blah, blah, blah. You got all of this stuff in there. It's all defined for you. Use the savings plan formula to find the balance after 1 year with an APR of 12% and monthly payments of $225. Go ahead. Okay. So 225 times, and yes, it is ugly up here, but you just take your time with your calculator, work your way through it. Type in exactly what appears here. Okay, don't change a thing. I use a graphing calculator, TI-84 Plus. I can literally type in exactly what appears there, and bam, out pops the answer, 0.1268. And then the bottom's pretty easy. 0.12 divided by 12 is 0.01. And then just do 225 times 0.1268. If you want, you can do equals and then divided by 0.01. And you'll come up with 28.53. And to me, that's a fair amount of money or fair estimate, because if I do 12 times 225, I think I come up with $2,700, and you make a little bit more money in interest off of that. So we did a problem the other day where we said if you want $3 million sitting in the account, how much would you have to contribute a month? It was quite a bit of money, but I think it's a little more reasonable to have $1 million sitting in the account. Go ahead, do it. In case you forgot, there's your formula. Remember, this is kind of going backwards on it, like when we did with Fahrenheit and Celsius and Fahrenheit. Okay, so $1 million equals the payment times, and again, that's just a bunch of stuff that you put into the calculator, and that works out to be 5.02257 divided by 0.05005, which is $1 million equals the payment times $1,004.52 dividing, and you get $995.50. And at first that sounds, oh, that's insane. I can never make those kind of payments. But I don't think that's so. Okay. I think it can kind of be done. I mean, I made $600 payments a month for a real long time. And if it's one person, it's a lot. But if you have a spouse, you're married, I think two people can put that away. I think that's reasonable. You probably put away a little bit more and get maybe up to 1.5 million in that account. All right. So there's one last thing I want to talk to you a little bit about before we get into the classwork contemplations and financial plans. You know what? I'll talk to you a little bit about it. Yeah, let me talk to you about it now. And that's giving. I mentioned before that money is a tool, and it really is. And you know, I don't know what you think about, if you even think about, you know, trying to live life the right way and what the right thing to do is. But I think that if in the course of our existence and our life here, I think one of the things we should be here to do is to try to make people's lives better and to try to help those who are less fortunate. And I really, really, really personally strongly resist when people talk about that becoming solely a government responsibility. I think it's a personal responsibility. And I think there's a number of reasons why I think that's super important. I think when the government, history has shown when the government gives, when the government becomes the primary caregiver for those with less, they tend not to make their lives better. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. And my grandfather, as I've mentioned, he was a dominant influence on me, and he was so proud of the fact that I went to college. And there was a point when I was in school, junior year, I'd had enough. I did not want to keep going. I just didn't want to do it. I was engaged at the time. I missed back home. It wasn't easy at that particular point in my life, and I paid the whole thing myself. I paid every dollar when it was due on time. So I was working 60 to 80 hour weeks plus the classes. Not instead of the classes, plus the classes. So it was really hard. And there was a point where I wanted to give up. But I thought about my grandfather, and I thought about how proud he was, and I couldn't face him. It would have been more painful for me to tell my grandfather I didn't make it than it would have been for me to tell my grandfather, or than it was for me to push through. And I think, my dog's barking. Excuse me. Hey! Sorry. So, when I think of what went on with when people give, and you know, if the government gives you, you don't really feel indebted to a personal government. But when your grandfather gives it to you, there's a face behind that dollar coming in. When you give to your community, when you give to family, to community, to people, and there's a face behind that, it's important. We sponsor a child in an undeveloped country, and we get cards from her, and she gets cards from us, and there's a face behind it, and there's a certain sense of commitment. So if the money that we put aside every single month for her, you know, if I don't see the kid, at one point I might say, oh, yeah, whatever, I could use the money. I don't need to give the money to her. I think having money behind it is a really important trait. And I think when you give personally, there's a connection that goes on there and a commitment one to another, and you don't want to let each other down. I heard once that a particular group of people, I don't want to get into labeling, but one particular classification of people in the country, that when someone graduates high school, they call in like the whole community and the whole family, and everybody gives a pretty good gift for the graduation, and it's all to be spent on college. So in this one event, the kid gets enough money to pay for college. but like I felt it, I couldn't let my grandfather down. I'd imagine that the kid would feel like, man, I can't let my community down. You know, they look at the investment they have in me. I have to come through for them. So I do think it's a really important thing to give to charity. And I think when you're giving to charity, there's this connection that goes on. You're helping them. You feel good that you're able to help somebody. And they, on the other hand, feel like, hey, I can't let that person down. I have to find a way to come through. And of course, naturally, there's also all the side benefits, that the immediate benefit of the charity and how it helps the people, or the research for drug diseases and cancers, or the wildlife and the environment, and so on and so forth. All right, so just a quick spiel about that. Enjoy. Have yourself a great day.